Welcome back to the Den of Nerds. You're going to love this one, especially if, like me, you're obsessed with this whole Robert Downey Jr. Dr. Doom thing. Where does this Dr. Doom come from? Why does he look like Tony Stark? What the fuck is happening? In this video, I go over some new comments made by insiders that help us understand a little bit more about what's going on with Robert Downey Jr. Dr. Doom. And then I end up yapping about basically everything we know, all these different theories, how it all fits together. I think, again, you're going to like it. Now, let's talk specifically about this. So Alex is saying a couple of things. He's saying, number one, that the universe that the Fantastic Four are from is probably going to be a one and done. Now, that's likely because that universe will be destroyed. Now, originally, we had heard that it was going to be destroyed in the film, and that the Fantastic Four themselves would leave that universe and come into 616. I have been told that is no longer in the movie, that they have changed it, and they want a happier ending for the movie where they basically just all work together and beat Galactus. They might even send Galactus to another universe. That's an established thing, right? But what I heard was they've changed it, and now Doom will destroy that universe in Doomsday. Okay? So that's pretty crazy. So maybe that's why it's one and done. It's also likely one and done because their next two appearances are going to be in Doomsday, which probably takes place mostly on 616, and then in the X-Men universe of 10005. And then there will be in Secret Wars, which will see the entire multiverse collapsed into a singular universe. Then you're going to get a soft rebooted MCU, and the Fantastic Four are very likely to just be a fixture in the new 616, okay? Are you following along? Is this a little confusing, chat? You know what I mean? Like, this is probably why they're not going to do a Secret Wars Part 2, because this shit is already confusing as right? But that's what we think is going on, okay? Now, I had always thought Doom was not from this Fantastic Four universe, okay? And in fact, according to a lot of the rumors and the things the scoopers were saying, I started to believe that Doom was very likely from the actual version of 616 before He Who Remains turned it into the sacred timeline, okay? Now, a couple other things we got to keep in mind here because we're definitely speculating. However, there's a lot of stuff we do know, okay? From reliable folks. It could change, but from reliable folks, okay? So, we know that the MCU is on a loop. This was something that was first reported by Paul from Heavy Spoilers years ago. Okay, years ago. But it was corroborated recently by a couple other scoopers that are saying that the MCU is essentially on a loop. And doesn't it make sense? I mean, that's what He Who Remains says at the end of Loki, right? He basically says, no matter what you do, we're going to end up back here. There will be all of my variants. There will be a multiversal war. I will end the multiversal war, and I will establish the new sacred timeline. That's the loop. That's what we're on. And by the way, the sacred timeline is literally a loop, which I think is kind of funny. They were like trying to show us pretty obviously what it was. In Paul's old report, back when it was going to be the Kang dynasty, he had said that we would get a variant of Kang that was him basically going through the loop for the first time. The reincarnated He Who Remains going through the loop for the first time and potentially actually being heroic until maybe flipping and becoming villainous or something. But so that was really interesting. Obviously, that's no longer happening. It seems like they've taken Kang out of the picture. However, with Kang now out of the picture, are we now free of the loop? Or are we just free of Kang's involvement in the loop? It kind of seems like we're still headed towards a multiversal war. We're still headed towards a resetting of the universe. It is a loop still. We just hope that this time it's a little bit different. Okay? Now, going back to some much older reporting from Alex Perez and Daniel RPK, it did seem like Doom was probably from a different, or from the original universe before He Who Remains started the loop. Okay? And it was described, I believe Alex described it as Doom feels like He Who Remains only cares about the sacred timeline and basically discards all other timelines. That could include the original version of 616. And I had this thought while I was thinking about this, where, you know, we have X-Men universes. It really does seem like this X-Men Utopia universe in Secret Wars is going to be like an X-Men Utopian universe, okay? And then you have this Fantastic Four Utopian universe. Then you seem to have an Illuminati universe, 838, which is a Utopian universe that involves a lot of the same characters, okay? And I started to think, back to this whole fixed moment in time situation, or like the canon event, or the fact that Doc Strange couldn't save Rachel McAdams in the What If show, right? It seems like there are confines. If you look at the sacred timeline in Loki, it's actually several timelines all kind of woven together, right? And so what I'm starting to believe is that Kang probably realized he can't make the multiverse without the X-Men. He can't make the multiverse without the Fantastic Four. There is an aspect of them that is somewhat eternal, or perhaps connected to eternity, quite literally. And so therefore, there were just things that were always going to happen, just like the canon events, just like the fixed moments in time, all of these different concepts. And so what Kang potentially did was take the characters that he knew he couldn't eliminate, and instead of destroying them, isolate them from each other. Is that potentially why the X-Men are in this particular universe and the Fantastic Four are in this particular universe? Okay. So let's go back to what Alex said about he's not sure that Doom is from their universe. Well, I know that there's a scene in the Fantastic Four movie, at least there was in the screening that happened a couple of weeks ago when I was in New York. There's a scene where the world leaders are gathered. It's a UN type situation. I've actually heard this scene described two different ways, which shows you like the game of telephone that we play when people are trying to remember and then they say it a certain way or whatever. I've actually heard this scene described in two different ways from two different people. But the one thing that they both said happened is that you look at all these different screens with all these world leaders and all these chairs, and the one for Latveria is empty. Okay? But other than that, zero reference to Victor, no discussion of him. It's not like there's a moment in the movie where Reed is like, if only my old college pal Victor were here, we'd solve this problem. Zero of that, from what I understand. And I think that's what Alex is saying. He's like, I'm not sure if he's from their universe, mainly because we don't get a single inkling of detail that proves that they know who Victor Von Doom is in their universe. So what I think could be happening here, and this would be so wild if it was true, is Doom and the X-Men, these things could not be eliminated from the timeline. And so what He Who Remains did was set up separate timelines to isolate these characters from each other to better control them, so that when the inevitable, because remember it's a loop, when the inevitable multiversal war happened, he'd be able to prune all those excess things and just focus on the sacred timeline. And therefore, the X-Men aren't really going to be a threat. Dr. Doom's not going to be really a threat. Like, a lot of things won't be a threat, okay? So I have this long-standing theory that what they're going to do is retcon Tony Stark from the Infinity Saga, and they're going to make it so Tony was actually Victor Von Doom that gets adopted. Okay? And so in the sacred timeline, in order to prevent Victor from being in that timeline, they do some shenanigans and make that variant adopted by the Starks and raised by the Starks. Okay? Now that theory is really wild. We don't know if that's true. There's some evidence. I like the theory, but it's just a theory. We don't know if it's true. But maybe what happens is the variant of Victor in the Fantastic Four universe begins to understand what the reality really is, which there's all sorts of ways you could do this. Time travel, multiversal travel, magic, traveling to talk to Mephisto or some shit. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that Doom could do to figure this out, okay? So what if Doom realizes, number one, that all the realities don't matter, including the one that he is living in, and yet the Doom in the sacred timeline, the one that like matters, was made to be a hero. And that would be like really gross and it would be shocking. Or that Doom was plucked out of the original sacred timeline, and then he was placed into the reality with the Avengers. And what if this connects to like anchor beings? You know what I mean? Like, there could be a lot that they're cooking sort of outside of this. But I wanted to bring it up because just a week ago or whatever, I thought, because of the scene with the Latveria thing, I thought it was kind of hinting that Doom was from that universe. And yet, I think Alex brings up a fair point. There's no details that prove that they know who he is. Now, there's one last thing we got to talk about here, and that's the post-credit scene. Because in the post-credit scene, this is big-time spoilers, but in the post-credit scene, Victor shows up, takes off his mask, and he's there holding Franklin in front of Sue. Okay? We don't fully know what this is. We don't fully understand what it means or whatever, but there's no clear evidence that Sue recognizes him. It's not like we know for sure that Sue's like, oh my God, Victor, where have you been? Or anything like that. So it's possible they have no experience with him whatsoever, which would be very chilling. Like, it would be so chilling if Doom understood everything and everybody, and yet all of the people around him don't really know what's going on. They don't recognize him. They don't understand what he's about, you know? So depending on how that scene goes, we'll either then understand that Doom is somewhat of an anomaly and is not connected to this universe, or he is from that universe and had left a long time ago to explore the multiverse, etc., etc. We don't know for sure, but I wanted to bring this up because it kind of gives my theory a little bit more life. It sort of shifts the conversation from, oh, he was just from that universe, to potentially something much more interesting. And I think that's good, because I would prefer it to be much more interesting. I'm going to be a little bummed if Doom just happens to look like Downey and there's no explanation, and then there's no, like, real depth to the character. He's just Doom from this universe that does Doom shit. Not good enough for me. So I'm hoping that it's more complex, that it's more sophisticated. And that's why I like the theory. That's why I like some of these other things that the scoopers have been talking about. This is just the latest that we know about it. I still think there's a chance that my theory's true and that Tony in the Infinity Saga was a Victor Von Doom variant that was adopted. I also think it's possible that Doom just comes from the original version of 616 and that Kang remade it. Let me know what you think about Robert Downey Jr. Dr. Doom in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.